So here's the state agencies that are primarily involved in our care team. We have our enterprise and technology system. We have our CISO and their security team. I think there's about 4 now, maybe 5 on the security team, and the state information security officer. Also the deputy CIO is a part of our care team as well. And so their goal is really for the state network, like the firewalls, making sure that there's security as a whole. And then we oversee the care team. We are the ones that get the call to activate the care team kind of by default, because we have a 24-hour duty officer number. We are emergency management. And so when those calls come in from the local level, say it's a water system or utility, that'll come to the emergency manager, then to our duty officer, to our director, and then to myself and the rest of the care team. So that's really how they get activated through our agency. And then our mission is really to prepare Wyoming to respond to and recover from all hazards. And cyber is an all hazard. We've worked really, really hard to try to normalize a cyber event in our state, just like it would be any other tornado, flooding, anything like that. And then we have our Fusion Center and our Computer Crimes Team. So both of them fall on a state statute. The Computer Crimes Team, the CCT, they have jurisdiction over all computer crimes in the state. And then the Fusion Center is just like any other Fusion Center in any other state, except we're incredibly small. There's about 3 full-time analysts. I do assist as their critical infrastructure analyst as well, but they help us collect, analyze, they disseminate any information. If there's an RFI that comes out, request for information, we can put that through our Fusion Center and they send it out to the Fusion Center network. They also, through our DHS intelligence and analysis person, they can dig into the HSDN account, see what else is going on out there, provide us a little bit more information. So they're a true asset to our team. Next slide, please. So here's a visual of kind of the care team day-to-day members. We have our office, ETS, we have the Computer Crimes Team, our Fusion Center, and the FBI. And then down below, we also have our DHS Intelligence and Analysis Officer, the National Guard, and our CISO resources. Our National Guard, we have a really small, what's called DCOE team, Defensive Cyber Operations Element. And they, there's only 8 of them. And I think they only have 6 billets filled. And so they're a newer team in the sense that they're still working through where is their role on this besides advisory to critical infrastructure, and when can they engage with hands on the computer for the state network. And then CISO, we just got a new cybersecurity coordinator in our state. He's been with us for about a year. He was our previous CISO, and he's been a phenomenal resource as well, because he still has that understanding of how our state network works and what the security team was doing. And then also bringing in those federal resources as well. Next slide. So really the scope, is really looking at those larger incidents. We've responded to over about 20 incidents in our state since 2019. We've been really heavily involved in some of the bigger events, more as that response team. Before it was, we actually cold called some of them, when we knew that there were some facilities, there was a utility that was hit. I made that cold call to him that said, "Hi, my name's Mikki, and we heard that you were hit with ransomware. We just wanted to offer up any resources that we can and kind of figure out where you guys are at in the process, what you need, how it happened." And they were very welcoming with it. So we also work exercise our plan. We've exercised our plan several times, both real world and planned exercises over the last several years. And we're just refining it. It's a living document and we update it all the time. We find pieces that are working well, pieces that aren't working well through response, what went well and how can we refine those processes, close those gaps, or something that's just not applicable to the process anymore. Next slide. So our roles and responsibilities. So through our office, we coordinate with all of our state and federal and local agencies to respond and recover from that cyber event. So it looks very interesting. And we'll go through a slide here that shows the process when the phone call comes in, how we handle the process. We do kind of always fall into a unified command as soon as a cyber call comes in, because ETS is just as involved as we are. So I help coordinate all the the resources and the people on the backside. And then ETS has the resources to go out to the field and start them to help recover. So our process really is to coordinate all of those people, make sure that everybody who needs to be on the call is on the call or involved in the event is involved in the event. Next slide. Our ETS, they directly align with, like to secure the cyberspace on all state network. A lot of our counties and local municipalities do touch our state network, whether it's through public health, through the school system, county clerks, elections. So they still have their fingerprints clear down to the local level. And so they work very closely with us and all of those partners to make sure that we're gathering, analyzing the information, what's hitting our network, what they're blocking from our network, and helping pass on some of the vulnerabilities that they're seeing that they've been able to block from our network. They also work with our risk management and other security and policy standards. They work with a lot of the directors on all the state agencies to make sure that everybody's meeting their standards on whether it's infrastructure that goes on the network, computers, down to ordering like a mouse and a keyboard. They have their hands over that as well. And then we collectively work together through those agencies to see what level that we need to escalate any event to respond to, and what level that we need to bring in at different agencies. Next slide. And then our Fusion Center, they'll analyze the threat information, we'll share best practices. We've worked really hard over the last several years to build up listservs for each critical infrastructure sector. So if you're a school sector, if you're the energy sector, we are working really hard to get those listservs out to push that information out to them as quickly as we can. Wyoming was one of the last states to get a state recognized fusion center. So we're about 6 years old now. And we have a really great director who is working through all those processes. And we've set up some new processes, different email inboxes and protocols for how we disseminate that information. And then we also work really, really closely with the computer crimes team as they need to pull them on something. And they're also another level to us for the FBI and other federal partners on what information that we need to share as far as policies, statutes, anything like that. Next slide. And then the computer crimes team, they are very, as you can see, there's a lot of state statutes there, but they are specifically around, like I said, they have jurisdiction over all computer crimes in the state, computer and data containment, they have ransomware, they have computer extortion. So when they're looking at, viruses, worms, ransomware attacks, anything like that, encryption, lock, anything on their computers, that will go to the computer crime team. And we have a new forensic analysis person who just came on board within the last year. So they'll be really fortunate to have him to start diving into a lot of this stuff that we had a gap in for a while. Next slide. And then our concept of operations. So this is really, a bad day happens, what happens? So in a cyber event, our duty officer will get the phone call, and then it'll be routed through the appropriate channels. And then as the event unfolds, we get more information, then we can either add more people into the care team, scale it down, scale it up. But our goal is to quickly identify as much of the information as we can. We have a Google intake form that has about 28 questions on there that we spent a good 6 months developing, because when you have DHS in the room, you have the FBI, you have all of these people that have information that they want to know. We wanted to try to capture it the best we could on the form. One of the first questions on the form, after name, date, and time, if you're a critical infrastructure asset, do you have cyber insurance? That is a really important question that we have on there, because if they have cyber insurance and their insurance company won't let them share information with us, then there's nothing we can do. We can't help them, because we don't want to violate their insurance policy and not have their insurance cover their ransomware event. So if they say yes, they have cyber insurance, and no, they won't let them share with us, then we say, hey, when you can, please reach back out to us. We'd be happy to help you. But if they say, yes, we have cyber insurance, and yes, they'll let us share with you, that's even better. And then we just ask them, what do you need? We take the lead from them. Next slide, please. So here's all of that in a pretty picture. So there's a cyber event, the call comes in the duty officer and then to the care team. we will call ETS, the computer crimes team, the Wyatt FBI, our federal partners with DHS, and then the National Guard. And really that can look like a phone call. And then we kind of split up the calling tree between myself and Todd, who's the Fusion Center director, or we have an email group that we send out. And we're in the process of looking at a different way to develop a quicker way to communicate, whether that's through a chat group. But we will get a hold of everybody and say, hey, here's what we know. I've sent them the intake form. As soon as I get the intake form and they get the results back, I share that with everybody, and then we set up a call. So then that way everybody has the same level of information when we get everybody on the call. Next slide, please. So here's another way that looks like for critical infrastructure. So like I said, we'll get the call from the local emergency manager. We create the intake form, then the care team gets it, and then we call everybody. We get everybody on a call, and this has worked really, really well. We made some tweaks to the intake form. There was a time where they couldn't upload a picture of like the ransomware note. So we've got that fixed. Some of the questions were a little out of order, so we reorganized them, but that's, we're practicing it in real world and figuring out what's best for everyone. But then we get everybody on the call and everybody's starting with the same level of information, which has been really valuable because we've been on other ransomware calls where we're assisting, the locals, and we're asking them the same questions 5 times that everybody's asking them the same question. And so this was a way for us to streamline the process that's been incredibly beneficial. They may not have all the answers at once, and it sounds silly. Well, you're emailing them a Google intake form, but their network's down. I have literally filled out the form for them on the phone. They'll call me from their cell phone or a different phone that's not been taken down. And I'll fill in all the information, or they'll say, hey, can you email it to this person? Or here's my personal email. Can you email it to here? And we'll start to get it filled out. Sometimes we do have it right away. Sometimes it takes a day or so. Sometimes we get them after the fact where they just did have a malware event and they still share that information with us. Next slide. And then this is what the Word version really of what it looks like for the state network. ETS leads that one. As they get, they deem what is appropriate on the state network on what level they need to escalate it on, then is how involved the care team gets. They fight malware all the time. They fight, hits on the network, people trying to get in, different vulnerabilities, blocking IP addresses, blocking nation state actors. That's their daily job. So not all of those make it to our level of attention, but when it does, they will come back and say, hey, we did have a couple malwares hit our state network because we have a monthly care team meeting, and they'll share that information out. So typically we'll get that information, say, hey, we at least they'll share the information through WOHS and the Wyatt and the computer crimes team of this is what we're seeing on the state network. Next slide. And this is it in a picture form. So the state network happens, the end user can call a help desk if they feel like they clicked the link, they downloaded something they weren't supposed to. They'll create a help desk ticket, then they assign it to the security team, and then we'll get the intake form. And then through the security team and their triage, they really decide what category or what priority it needs to be. And then they'll notify the CISO, the security manager, and then we'll follow up with ETS if we need to do a phone call with everything, if it can just be handled through email. And then we'll work to that resolution to see what other assistance that they need, whether they need SIAC. We've even called that in for the locals. We had a community college that we were able to do the SIAC help desk ticket for them to get that process started because they were fighting the fight, right? They were trying to get their network back up and functioning. Next slide. And so this is our standard. This is from the Presidential Policy Directive 41. This is what we use to escalate those cyber events on the state network. And we also look at the severity level for our critical infrastructure partners too. I forgot to mention that when we do set up those calls, we typically do have a representative from the governor's office. We don't always have FBI on the call, but they are part of the email that we send out. And we ask the victim, do you want the FBI involved yet? Do you want them on the call? Are you okay if we share that information with them? And we take the lead from them. Also, we do post all of our information, our communication between the victim and ourselves in his Adobe Connect room because it's secure. We can control the information or who has access to that information. And so it's just not out there for the public because our agency, we do use WOHS, but none of our cyber events go into WOHS at all. Next slide. And then I think this is my second to last slide, but this just highlights what the Council of Governors is doing, which is the same process. So we started our care team following this process before this was really a process. So our governor is co-chairing that Council of Governors cybersecurity working group. And so along with Louisiana's governor, and this is one of the best practices that our working group came up with. So I wanted to share that with everybody that this will be coming out. It'll be on the NGS website. But this is essentially the process that we followed in our state before it was really a process. We just looked at who and the resources we had at our state. We knew we had a gap and we needed to do something about it. And we wanted to normalize cyber events. I know we have probably more each day in our state that are going unreported. And then really finding out, let's engage those federal partners and then let's formalize this step. We are working on with our governor's office to hopefully eventually get an executive order to formalize us in that way. But we have been utilized a lot throughout the state in doing this process. So it's been very beneficial for our state. We've done a lot of presentations with the water sector, with the energy sector, with a lot of our emergency managers, oil and gas on this process and this resource around the state. And we do get a lot of, they'll email us, hey, we have a lot of questions. Hey, we just wanted to report this. So it's been a really great process for our state. It's really brought us together and refined everything. We are going to put our care team to the test yet again during our Vigilant Guard exercise in June. We have a big cyber scenario exercise for the state network. So we're going to test that response plan that we have and how we engage all of our partners and making sure that we're still on track within our plan and making those adjustments after our Vigilant Guard exercise in June. Next slide. Any questions? I think we can leave them to the end or put them in the chat, but that is a quick overview of Wyoming's cyber assistance response effort team, our care team. So thank you guys today for letting us present.
Mikki, there's a question for you in the chat box, if you're able to see the Q&A box. Could you elaborate on how you lobbied to get the executive order?
So we don't really lobby since we're state employee. We have put that to our directors and said, hey, we really need something that puts us in state statute, because a lot of states are doing that where there's a state statute. You'll hear from Utah here in a second about how they did it. But we've worked with our policy advisor in the governor's office on working towards that. Actually, part of this slide deck is for the governor for that. So we've just said, hey, here's what we've done. And here's how it's worked really great. And here's what other states are doing. And then we're letting them make the decision.
Great. Thanks, Mikki. And we'll get to additional questions at the end. But right now I'm going to kick it over to Utah, Mallory and Catherine, to talk about their model.
Thanks, Casey. As she said, my name is Catherine Shipman. I'm the Supervisor Intelligence Analyst at the Utah Fusion Center, the Statewide Information and Analysis Center. I'm going to give you guys just a quick, brief introduction to who we are. Next slide. As you know, fusion centers were created after 9/11. Based on the findings, they found that one of the reasons we had that huge intelligence failure was that we didn't have enough communication between local and federal partners. So that puts fusion centers in a really unique position, as our whole goal is to kind of bridge that. And Utah's lucky. We have great partnerships with our federal partners and also with our private and public local partners, especially our critical infrastructure and a lot of, we have some really great partners there. And so because of this, we've been tasked, the SIAC has been tasked with managing the Cyber Commission, which Mallory, our analyst that's in charge of that, has really headed up their efforts there. And so I'm going to turn the time over to her to tell you more about what it is, how we created it, and how some of the challenges that we've overcome and where we're headed now. Mallory.
Thank you. So, like Catherine mentioned, SIAC has had the opportunity to be involved with our state's Cybersecurity Commission, and this is really just our state's approach to protecting it against cyber threats. So, like Catherine mentioned, I'm going to go over some of our duties on the commission our membership and how we divided our members into subcommittees, how those subcommittees provided recommendations that went into an annual report, and then our plans for this next year. Next slide. So for us, this all starts really in October of 2021. This is when Governor Cox announces the Governor's Cybersecurity Task Force. And this really stemmed from Governor Cox's concern in protecting critical infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, and his understanding that cybersecurity is something that can affect all of us. This is our way of trying to collectively address those issues. So I think that's a really important note when we're talking about cybersecurity, that this is really more of a team sport. It's not something that just one agency can do. It works better when everyone works together to try and improve cybersecurity across the board. So protecting our rural areas that often have underfunded and understaffed IT departments is protecting more than just that one city or county. It protects Utah residents as well and the broader community. So we were really lucky that Governor Cox understood that and that he was willing to work on this with us. So the intent of the task force was really just to protect the state's critical infrastructure from cybersecurity attacks, and then bring together resources from both public and private sector and critical infrastructure sectors as well. So following this announcement of the task force, it gained enough traction that House Bill 280 was proposed and passed in 2022, which codified the task force, and it underwent a little bit of a name change. So it went from the Governor's Cybersecurity Task Force to the Governor's Cybersecurity Commission. This, like Catherine mentioned, is supported by the SIAC, and this is just because we already maintain a lot of these contacts, and it puts us in a really good place to try and help facilitate this commission. And then our commission is chaired by Governor Cox and our Public Safety Commissioner, Jess Anderson, and they are both really supportive and have helped a lot with getting this going. Next slide. So what does our commission do? Well, this is outlined for us in our legislation, but our main job is to identify and inform the governor and our state legislators on cyber threats and vulnerabilities towards critical infrastructure, as well as notifying them of what kinds of cyber assets and resources are available, providing our analysis of the threats and vulnerabilities that face the state, looking to provide some best practices, and then collaborating with both the public and private sector to enhance those cyber capabilities statewide. And so those are our main duties. But another one that I would add is that if you're familiar with the state and local cybersecurity grant program, we use our commission as the voting body to approve measures needed for the grant process. And so those are just some of the duties that we fulfill on the commission. And then also our members consist of both the government and private sector representatives. And I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. So who is on our commission? We have designees from each of the agencies and organizations you see on the screen, and then a few more too. So our bill and subsequent law outline for us, how our commission should be comprised and what their role in the commission should be. So we have both voting members and advisory members, and our voting members come to us from agencies like the Lieutenant Governor's Office, the Attorney General's Office. We have our State Chief Information Officer, the State CISO, as well as other agencies like the Health Department and the Board of Education. We have a senator and a House of Representatives member as well. And so these people are the members who can vote on commission items that need to be improved. So I mentioned like the SLCGP, that is something that these individuals could vote on and approve. And then our advisory members are really more of our, they're our federal partners. So that includes CISA, as well as the FBI. and then our critical infrastructure sectors as well. So we have people from the energy sectors, we have chemical, healthcare, commercial, some of the big venues here in our state, as well as water and wastewater and communications. And they all sit on our committee as advisory members and really offer us a lot of invaluable insight into not only their needs and challenges, but ways they've overcome certain obstacles as well. Some other members that we have, just I think that are worth noting, we have someone, for example, from the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel who can assist us should the commission decide they want to pursue legislation. And that is a resource that we also retain on our commission as well. So I think one of the things that we're really proud of here in Utah is that our commission really, our members span a wide spectrum of organizations, and we really feel like this gives us a lot of varied experience and unique viewpoints when it comes to cybersecurity. And so we see that as a benefit. We have about 50 members on our commission, which is a pretty large group. And that has been a really great thing, I think. But, I think, just to talk about some of the challenges that we face with this, and this is of no fault of our members or the agencies, but, last year was our first year, and getting the buy-in from all of these organizations did take a little bit of legwork and a little time. We also were required to have half of our members have professional experience in cybersecurity or AT. And so going through some of these agencies, in particular, the state agencies, some of these groups are, like 10-man shops, and they don't have a dedicated IT professional, but they're providing a designee to the commission. And that turned out to be okay. It wasn't really a big problem in the end. And honestly, having some people without that cybersecurity background, I think has been a good thing for our commission as well. So maybe a few challenges there, but easily overcome. And now we're at a place where the commission has really become well known throughout our state. We're actually getting people want to be a part of it. People are requesting to be members. And so we're actually kind of having to turn people away or try and find other ways to involve people that want to get involved with this. So that is our membership. Next slide. So once we had our commission membership designees, we felt like the best way to organize things going forward was to really create some subcommittees that could focus on different aspects of cybersecurity. So we had our group that was looking at cybersecurity assets and resources. So really looking at ways to get additional funding or looking at grant opportunities that could be used throughout the state. We had a group looking at best practices. So this is things like frameworks and guidelines and how those can be used to help improve cybersecurity as well. And then we have engagement and outreach, which is really just, improving partnerships, increasing collaboration, and making sure that we have some established ways to share information. And then incident disruption response. This is like your incident response plans and ways to help foster preparedness and manage risks associated with cyber attacks. So we created these subcommittees, and what we did is we just simply surveyed our members and asked them to rank which subcommittees they wanted to work on. We also asked our members if they were interested in leadership positions. We felt like it would be a good thing to have each subcommittee chaired by a member on the committee. And so once we got all of that information back, we were able to move everyone into a subcommittee that they were interested in. I think everyone was in either their first or second choice for subcommittees. And then we put a voting member in a chair position on each subcommittee. And that's really just to help get the conversation started, to help create that buy-in and get people talking. And then we also, each subcommittee subsequently created a mission. They created goals and things that they wanted to work on. And that was really helpful for them to give them some direction when we were first starting. Next slide. So once we had our subcommittees, they began meeting on their own. And what they did was they were really coming up with ideas and recommendations that they could provide to the commission. And so we reconvened our commission, and we had a commission meeting where each subcommittee presented their recommendations, their findings, and those recommendations were approved by the voting members of the commission. And the approved recommendations went into a final commission report. And this report was presented to the Public Utilities, Energy and Technology Interim Committee. Our commission chair, the Department of Public Safety Commissioner, Just Anderson, presented this to them so that they could see what we had been working on the last year. Next slide. So in total, our first year, we had 13 approved recommendations that went into our 2022 commission report. And I'm just going to go over a couple of them to give you an idea of some of the things that they talked about and some of the things we'll be working on here this next year. So the first was to develop and fund a website or a sharing platform that could provide resources based on recommendations from the subcommittees. So this is something our public outreach subcommittee recommended and something they will be working on more this year. And really their idea was to create a website that could serve as not only a sharing platform, but one that could be a repository for cybersecurity resources. They talked about the potential for this website having a public-facing aspect where like anyone in the state could potentially access it for resources, as well as having portions of the site potentially locked down to certain communities for specialized threat intelligence or information sharing. And so that's something that they're going to be working on a lot more this year to try and firm up plans for that and get some, plans laid for that. We also had a recommendation for identifying additional sources of funding. So that includes the state and local cybersecurity grant program, and also looking at other ideas or ways to obtain funding as well. We also looked at focusing or identifying resource gaps, needs, specifically looking at hardware, software, personnel, and training. And a really cool idea that this group is working on is something that we're calling the hardware donation program right now. And this is looking at ways that we could gather and decommission old hardware from agencies or organizations and putting those into a pool where those items can be donated to other agencies with a need. And so this is this is a big project, and this is something that is going to take some time to flesh out, but it's something we're working on. We think this is a really great idea and will really serve some of our rural areas that may not have, again, they may not be staffed, they have the staffing that they need, and they may not have the funding that they need. And utilizing something like this would be really helpful for them. I don't think it's that far off to say that there may be some places that, small municipalities that don't even have a firewall in their system. So if they can access an old firewall that someone has donated to the program, that would be really beneficial to them as opposed to having nothing. So that's a cool program that that committee is working on. We're also talking about developing and providing leading cybersecurity strategies. So when we talk about this, we're talking about those cybersecurity frameworks, what those are and how people can implement those. And there are quite a few different frameworks to choose from. but finding a way that we can create a baseline here in the state and reach some of these smaller areas and help improve their cybersecurity there. And then we had the recommendation for identifying gaps in the incident reporting process for both public and private sector, and identifying what incidents currently require reporting. So as you are potentially aware, reporting can be something that is hard to get. There are a lot of concerns when there's a cyber incident that it could damage their reputation. There are legal concerns. Mikki mentioned like cybersecurity, that can complicate things as well. And so that's something we don't get a lot of, but we were really excited because Senate Bill 127 actually came out this year, and this is as a result of our recommendations in our 2022 annual report. And this bill is looking to improve the reporting processes for cyber incidents where a data breach occurs. And this would require those individuals that suffer a data breach to report those incidents to the state. And so we're really excited about this, considering that last year was our first year as a commission, and we really worked on a pretty condensed timetable, starting everything up and getting going last year. This was a really unexpected win for the commission. So as of today, this bill has passed committee favorably, and we're hopeful that it will make it through the process, and we're really excited about that. Another idea that I just kind of wanted to mention, since we're talking a lot about incident response, was that our incident response team also discussed setting up a way, like a cyber incident hotline, where incidents could not only be reported to the state, but where they could also get assistance if needed. So that is something that, again, will be discussed more this year. We're hopeful that we can really get some more bills on the docket next year. But that is one thing that our commission was really careful of. They didn't want to approve any recommendations that might, be getting ahead of ourselves. And so the members were very intentional about making sure that things are well thought out, and that they could, have a good plan in place before any legislation was pursued. So I think this next year will be a really big year for us. And then I think Catherine maybe linked to the full commission report. There is a full commission report and a summary of the commission report that I will link to. This is publicly available on our Utah State Legislature website as well, but these reports really have all of the information I'm telling you. A lot of that is going to be in these reports, and would give you a good idea of like where we're going with this. Okay, next slide. So this is our intended 2023 commission timeline. So you can see that right now we're really in more of a planning stage. We're monitoring the state's cyber legislation to see how that could potentially affect the commission in the coming year. We're planning our April meeting. So April will be our first commission meeting. We're required to have 2 commission meetings every year. And so the plan is kind of to stagger those, one at the beginning of the year and one towards the end. And so we're planning that meeting right now. We are confirming our subcommittee chairs and our membership. As you can imagine, having a membership of this size, there is some turnover, people leaving jobs and going other places. So making sure we fill all of our vacancies, and then doing some research. So last year, our subcommittees kind of identified some things that they wanted to work on. And we have an intern working with us right now who is actually doing some research projects for them. So we're hopeful that with these research projects, we can give these to the subcommittees and they can kind of hit the ground running and do with it what they need to get to reach their goals. I mentioned our commission meeting in April. That will get us kicked off for the year. And then following that, we will start hosting our subcommittee meetings. Those will happen all the way until approximately October, when we'll start planning our next commission meeting. And at that meeting, that's again where those subcommittees will present their findings to the commission for approval. And then that annual report will be finalized and reported to the legislative committee. Next slide. So I hope this illustrates how Utah is working to respond to cybersecurity measures here in our state. Mikki really highlighted Wyoming's approach as an incident response team and how they're working to respond to cyber incidents. And so while Utah has not created something like a care team yet, maybe in the future, I think the Cybersecurity Commission is putting us in a good place to be able to plan and implement something like a care team in the future. And so this could be a good place to start if someone is looking for ways to get going. This may be like a good ground level place to get going with that. I believe that what's most important is that the protection of our states and cybersecurity assets is a shared responsibility among multiple stakeholders, and having a cybersecurity commission with this varied cybersecurity background and experience is really going to help us get where we want to be. And this is a quote from Governor Cox that really encapsulates our approach on the commission, just highlighting the need for cooperation between multiple sectors. Are there any questions? Sorry, I went a little quickly there, but are there any questions that I can answer?
Thanks, Mallory. And just to reiterate, I do want to encourage any of our attendees here today to please feel free to submit any questions that you have that didn't get answered yet into that Q&A feature that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And while we wait for those to come in, I kind of want to open it up to our panelists here today to just see if there was anything that really resonated with you from your colleagues' presentations, or if there was anything else that you wanted to add, or especially if you have insights for other state folks who are on the line who might be looking to do something similar in their own states, if you have any words of wisdom or anything like that.
This is Mikki. One thing I did want to add is we just had our last meeting last month, and we did talk about as a care team opening up our process to the locals. So to the counties, to the municipalities and the school districts. And so we kind of been talking about it. And then I was asked to put it towards the team, the care team, to see what their decision was. And everybody was in agreement that that would be a good idea. So now we're in that process of looking at what does that look like. It'll probably take us the next year or so to really figure out that process on what it looks like to apply to it. You know, NDAs, do we make them, because Wyoming, we're split up into some regional response teams for hazmat. Do we model it after that? So I just wanted to throw that out there too, that, you know, we're not trying to keep it just at the state and federal level. We do want to open it up to empower our local municipalities and jurisdictions to be able to help each other in their community as well. So I think one of the takeaways that I took a couple notes from Mallory is that hardware donation program, I think, is a wonderful idea, because we have some counties within our state that might benefit. So I think that's a great idea, and that hotline. So I love how you guys are doing your process. I think it's great.
And I would just say too, I think, you know, Mikki's presentation about the care team, I think that's something that we can take to our incident and disruption response subcommittee for them to kind of consider and see how they approach this. I think it's hard sometimes when you're talking about cybersecurity to like feel like you're drinking from the ocean, right? There's just like so much, and like, where do you even start? And so seeing what other people have done is a really, I think, beneficial thing. And it helps you kind of, you know, take those initial sips and like figure out how to get your feet underneath you. And so I think that is going to be really helpful for us, for our team.
I would just say, you know, going along with both what Mikki and Mallory said, I think everybody knows cybersecurity is important. I don't think that's the struggle. I think the struggle is that there's a lot of unknowns. A lot of people don't understand the real threats or what that means, or there's a lot of fear that's based around it about having help or having, reporting. There's just a lot of challenges with cybersecurity because it is such a scary thing and people don't know how to handle it. It can be overwhelming. And I think one of the things that comes from today's discussion is it's those relationships that really matter. It's one reason why I love some of the stuff that Mallory mentioned about our commission and how building those relationships, having those conversations, finding out what the real challenges are with, a little local county that may have different issues than a bigger county, or, a private sector that has different needs than a public sector, and finding those and having those conversations to kind of get rid of some of that fear and that overwhelming, so that people know that there's help and that we're doing this as a team and we're not just going to have a one solution fits all, because that's not really practical.
Completely agree. And I think that's kind of why we maintain this webinar series at NGA. We really want this to be a place where we can share best practices with each other and, highlight the different things that you all in your states are doing. So I just want to kind of put this out there that, if there's any of you who, would like to reach out to me with ideas for a topic to present, my contact information can be found on this website or on this slide. Feel free to shoot me an email with anything that you are working on that you're excited about that you really want to highlight, like Mikki, Mallory, and Catherine did here today. We really want to tailor our webinar offerings to you all. So, having our state officials kind of dictate that is really beneficial to, I think, everyone. I guess lastly, I'll say that these slides in this presentation will be uploaded to our website. I know there's been some questions coming in about that. We will share the slides probably in a day, or at least by early next week, we'll have that all up on our website. And I just want to really thank our panelists here today for sharing the good work they're doing over in the Mountain States. And thank you all for joining the National Governors Association and continuing to advance cybersecurity priorities across all of your states. I really, really appreciate it. And so that's it for me. Look out for future webinar invites and have a great rest of your day.